warn you that this is, we're talking about very extreme things. I was taken to a special room, a secret room with a butcher's block where I was tied to this butcher's block and I was tortured. So what Satanists do is they call on the lower vibrational beings. These are intelligences separate from us.
Like programs.
That mind control training, which lasted 1 month, that was the official, which people say MK Ultra, it's more like that. But I saw energetically, I saw people becoming completely inhuman and as if they were taken over by another entity, that's for sure.
Wake up inside. Spalten bug me at the you information. Connect the dots. Big picture. Gosh. Who knows?
Hallo und herzlich willkommen zurück bei Tom Who Knows. Heute habe ich ein sehr spezielles Thema für euch. Wie vielleicht ein paar wissen oder auch nicht wissen, habe ich 2016 schon ein Video gemacht über dieses Thema Pädophilie und speziell in politischen und größeren Kreisen, schon Proteste und so. Auf das möchte ich gar nicht weiter eingehen. Ich bin selbst Vater eines 6-jährigen Sohnes und wie ihr wisst, gehe ich sehr tief in diese Kaninchen aus. Und was man dort teilweise findet, ist wirklich wie in einem Film oder wie in Filmen, wie sie es uns oft zeigen. Und ich bin da über jemanden gestolpert, auf die liebe Anneke Lucas. Und Anneke war Teil eines solchen pädophilen rituellen Netzwerkes, wie auch immer diese Bezeichnung genau ist. Sie werden sich wahrscheinlich selbst anders nennen. Und ich hatte das Interview von ihr gesehen und war sehr getoucht, auch weil ich selbst einen Sohn habe. Und deswegen wollte ich unbedingt mit ihr reden. Und wie Gott will, hat sie mir das Vertrauen geschenkt und hat gesagt, okay, wir setzen uns zusammen einmal 2 Stunden, um über dieses Thema zu sprechen, was so atemberaubend ist. Und sie ist heute da und ich bin sehr, sehr dankbar, liebe Anneke. Danke, dass du dir die Zeit nimmst und das Vertrauen. Thank you very much. Okay, let's try to jump on in. Was ist deine Geschichte? Wie hat es begonnen? Das Internet kennt dich mittlerweile als jemand, der sehr früh in diese Kreise gekommen ist. Aber ich würde es gern von dir hören. Where does the story begin? Your story.
Ja, okay. Ja, und ich würde gerne sagen, dass das ist das erste Mal, dass ich Deutsch spreche für ein Interview und mein Deutsch ist nicht so gut, aber ich verstehe alles und ich spreche das ein bisschen, habe das auch gelernt in das Netzwerk, Network habe ich das gelernt von einem deutschen Politischer, hat mir das, er hat die deutsche Sprache geliebt und Deutschland, er liebte Deutschland und so hat er, das war sein, das hat ihn freudig gemacht, ne? Mir Deutsch anzulernen und so, das war ganz einfach und ja, so, ich verstehe alles, aber ich war 9 Jahre alt und habe ich das wirklich nie mal gesprochen, danach, ne? So, I'm going to speak English because that's the language that I will be able to speak about this subject.
Yeah, and we will translate it with subtitles in German. And we said I will try to speak in English, but I'll try German because it gives me a better range for me. So let's try to synchronize.
Okay. So yes, my story in short was that I was born to a single mother in 1963 in Brussels, Belgium, who herself was, though she was working and she was functional, she was working as a secretary at the local, which was the national and the only television station at the time, 63, it was beginning of TV. And she was not mentally well. So she was abusive from the start. She was married to someone that she met.
Recording in progress.
That was
She
just
was
assume. Sorry.
okay. She was married to someone. When I was 3 years old, 1966. Sometimes I say 4 years old. So sometimes if I'm not completely correct on the details, but yeah, I was actually 3 years old, and we then moved to Flanders. And in the village where we lived, I think she was singled out also because she was not well. And soon we had a cleaning lady who proposed to take me out with her husband on outings. So now I was going with the cleaning lady and her husband on outings every weekend, pretty much. My mother had my brother, my half brother, so she was very happy to have me taken off her hands. And I didn't like those people. I never wanted to go. And when we were going, there were always different children there. So they were Dutch people, and so we were Belgian. So they would say that these are their nieces and nephews, and some children were Dutch, others were Belgian. They always kept me a little bit separate from the children, and they would change all the time also. So she came to work for us when I was 5, and just around my 6th birthday was the first time that this couple, the man, the husband, took me to a network event in a castle, and immediately it was extreme. It was it was just unbelievably extreme. It was not, there was no gradual indoctrination. It was just thrown into an extreme situation, which was a masked ball. People were dressed as hippies. It was extremely confusing. There were drugs being passed around on silver platters because we were in a castle. So I didn't understand that these people were not hippies. They were aristocrats that were dressed as hippies, and other people that belonged to the network. And I was horrendously abused right away, and in an extreme fashion. So
at an age at 6?
Around my 6th birthday, 5 to 6. So we're talking extreme S&M right away. And so it was the first time, and I immediately, I was so humiliated that I immediately, because it was the first time, I stood up and spoke up. I knew that I had to say something. I felt like I needed to save my soul. I needed to save my life. Otherwise, I would not survive, it felt like. So I spoke up. I told everyone that they couldn't do this to me.
Who did you talk to? Sorry to interrupt. I just want to go into the details. Like, if this would happen, wenn es mir passieren würde, wie würde ich reagieren? So denke ich mir das vor. Hast du mit deinen Eltern drüber gesprochen? Was hast du getan? Was war der erste Impuls? Weil
Nein, gar nicht, nein. Because it was a public event, there were people there, and I was abused on a stage in the middle of a salon.
just to get these pictures straight, like there are people having a party, a mask party, and there is some kind of eine Bühne sozusagen, wo dann Misshandlungen, Kinder, Rituale etc. durchgeführt werden.
The husband of the cleaning lady, so he was abusing me on a stage.
Before this happened already?
This was happening there. So this was the first time when I was taken to this network. He had me on a dog collar and leash. And he was naked, and so was I. And so he was humiliating me on the stage as he had me on a collar and leash. And the people around that were dressed up as hippies were so high and drunk that they barely noticed, although he did something extreme. And then people would go, oh, gross, you know, and they sort of turn away. But
still not my type. And
the child being abused, there was a child being horribly abused on a stage. Clearly the people that were there were used to that. Nobody seemed shocked by that.
Du wirst doch sicher Menschen in die Augen geblickt haben. Was waren das für Menschen? Keiner, der irgendwie Mitgefühl hat und du siehst einfach, dass er, weißt du, wie ich meine?
Nobody, but nobody looked me in the eye. I wasn't trying to look in people's eyes. I was so humiliated, you see.
Wow.
I wasn't trying to look. I was being, abused while I was being treated like a dog. So no, I wasn't looking anyone in the eye. But people clearly were used to children being treated this way. That's, and I believe that they were aristocrats. But so after that, I was just left lying there. The collar was removed and the man left, but I was lying there by myself on the stage and everyone was completely ignoring me. And at this moment, I felt, no, I cannot. If I don't do something now to save myself, I will die. That was what I felt. So then I stood up, and then as I stood up, I felt force in my body, just straightened me up. And then I spoke and I said, you can't do this to me, to the people there. You can't do this to me. I'm going to make sure you'll all be punished. Nobody took it seriously, except one man, because everyone was too high. Everybody was so high, they barely noticed.
High on what? What do you think? High on what? Just
well, the drugs were being
or
passed around.
MDMA? So
it's 1969. The drugs that were being passed around was LSD. Clearly,
like the psychic growing,
but it was everything and everything. There were joints on silver platters, there were pills, everything. It was a drug party. It was a masked ball where people were dressed as hippies, but also doing the drugs that the hippies were taking. So everybody was completely out of it, except for when I stood up, there was one man who looked very scared and he left. So he looked at me, he did look at me, and I thought I reached him, but he left. That was a man who later became first prime minister. But in the network, I never saw him again, but he was the one I recognized later. So this was the first time I was taken to the network. It was completely extreme. After I stood up and spoke, I was taken by a handler to a large basement, and I was shown, and I have to just
take your space,
warn you that this is we're talking about very extreme things. I was shown a body of a young woman who had just been murdered.
In which country do you still know? Do you know where this place is?
Belgium.
Do you know where this place is?
No, I don't know the castle this was at. There's a lot of castles in Belgium. It was in Belgium. And it turned out, as I was in the network over 5 years, it turned out that there's quite a few castles, quite a few aristocrats that were giving up their castles for orgies for the network, which the network was consisting of politicians. Well, it was the royalty, so the top of the aristocracy, if you will, that were really in charge. And then there was the then Minister of National Defense, Paul van den Boeynants, who was sort of the mafia boss of the network. who was arranging everything and who was getting people in. Now, this first party, I didn't see, this was a mass ball, so it was more among, it felt like it was more among the elite. It was more among the aristocrats. And but after that, I started being used very regularly at events, so it would be, much tamer. Even orgies would usually be tamer. I never again saw an S&M show during an orgy afterwards. It was rather that there was a party, and then maybe there was an orgy, maybe there was sex happening, and then the children, I was waiting in an antechamber with a handler, with maybe some other children, until those people that were not ready supposedly for children were gone. So we were brought in the late hours, and then those that remained would be used either to be indoctrinated into this exclusive club of power, where I would make them, as a 6, 7, 8-year-old, I would have to make them feel comfortable to be with a young child. And that was then taped, or it was secretly photographed or videoed, and then those people would be forever in the pocket of, whoever the politician who was running the network that had a lot to do with it, a lot of say. He was blackmailing everyone. And then those people would find themselves, in increasingly important positions in government, or if they were lawyers, they would then do jobs for the network. Then the aristocrats, some of these aristocrats were already part of it. And then, of course, the thing with the royalty is that I didn't even know some of those people were royals until I didn't know who anyone was, to tell you the truth. But one of the royals, for example, that was in charge there is not at all known to the public, for example.
I guess there are so many. Ich probiere es auf Deutsch, weil ich bin seit 12 Jahren in diesen ganzen Themen drinnen und recherchiere und versuche an den Kern ranzukommen. Und es gibt definitiv, wir haben auch einen Fall, Natascha Kampusch hier in Österreich und so weiter, da möchte ich später vielleicht kurz eingehen, das ist ein sehr heißes Thema, zumindest in Österreich. Der Chefermittler ist da gestorben, einfach so, der behauptet hat, es ist crazy. Und es gibt diese Netzwerke. Es gibt einfach diese Netzwerke, und du bist für mich ein zusätzliches Beispiel einfach, dass das keine Fiktion ist, kein Hirngespinst und so, weil es gibt Prince Andrew zum Beispiel, Epstein, das sind alles Themen, die belegen, das, von dem du sprichst, da hast du die Beweise, weil es sind so viele Menschen, die auch sagen, naja, du könntest ja eine Person sein, die sich das alles einbildet, das wäre eine getwistete Story. Versteh mich richtig, was kannst du davon beweisen? Wobei, beweisen ist immer eine Perspektive. Nicht, dass ich es in Frage stelle, aber es gibt Menschen, die hören dir zu in ihrem Kopf und denken sich, kann ich mir nicht vorstellen, die lügt sicher. Was wollen wir denen entgegnen? Weißt du, wie ich meine?
Yeah, so for proof, it's like I'm talking about things that happened 50 years ago in a network where the greatest specialty of the network is to be able to get rid of all evidence, and that includes witnesses, of course. We know in the Dutroux case that at least 30 people their life ended when they wanted to testify specifically about the existence of the network, rather than that Marc Dutroux handled with just a few people around him. But for me personally, I spent most of my life healing from this trauma. So when I look at how I was in the early 20s, I can tell my story a little bit more later, because I was out of the network by age 11. So there's several aspects to my story that are unusual. First, I was a throwaway child, as they say, and I was used for anything. But then I took someone. What
is a throwaway child? Maybe to get some
context.
Means
a child that can be killed.
I mean, das einfach so in einem Satz gesprochen. Ich meine, es sind in der Flüchtlingskrise Zehntausende Kinder verschwunden, die in Deutschland eingereist sind, aufgenommen worden sind mit Namen und keiner weiß, wo sie sind. Tausende, nicht Zufall. Es können ja ein paar Kinder verschwinden oder andere Namen, okay, aber Tausende. Und das ist kein Bullshit oder eine Verschwörungstheorie und das passiert überall und das sind solche Throwaway Children, right?
Yes, throwaway children, exactly. And that is also, by the way, I work with survivors. So, for example, one survivor of Jeffrey Epstein was actually taken by him in Kosovo as a baby. You see, so the orphans of the war zones are put in places where then traffickers, elite traffickers also come to get children. And, depending on then, they get triaged, the children are triaged. And now initially in the network, I was going to, anybody could do anything with me. So there were a few instances with some very sick aristocrats that I definitely could have died, and it was just an accident, that I survived. However, at 9 years old, I was then chosen to be part of the network, to become an inside child of the network by an international, by David Rockefeller, who I recently named. And he was there, he came to Belgium because he was a part of the Bilderberg meeting that year in 1972 when I was 9 years old, and I was given to him as well as another child for a ritual. The other child was killed, and he very.
How will you know? Sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to make the.
I was there, but I don't want to talk about that now because I was telling you something else. But just to say that I ended up being miraculously chosen, and then singled out to become his project, the project of David Rockefeller, who was then going to be behind me and who was going to create me into the slave that he wanted, which would be, I would be given a platform, I would be receiving a lot of the gifts that you get when you are part of this club. And so my life changed completely. The way people treated me changed, the way abusers treated me changed completely. So I was in the unusual position to be both a throwaway child at first, and then to be an inside child afterwards, and to be out at age 11, and then never to be in again, never to be used again afterwards. So I had most of my life to heal. And so we were talking about proof, and I just want to come back to that, because for proof, when you heal, so I didn't remember, the mind control is all about dissociation, and trauma dissociates you. So the trauma of the network itself would already dissociate you. But then the mind control training means that you are deliberately traumatized in order to dissociate you. So naturally, you wouldn't remember something because you in the trauma becomes so severe that all your brain activity reduces.
It overrides the memory and it does its things to hide it as good as possible, right?
Yes, and it's extremely scientific in the way that this is applied. And while I was so in the beginning, I still remembered, but then I was with my mother, who.
Why didn't you talk? Sorry I'm so sorry. I'm not just trying to understand you better. Why didn't you go to your mom, for example? Okay, this happened in the beginning. I think did you talk to your mom?
Well, I did. I tried to talk to my mother. I tried to talk to my mother when I was 6 years old, when it first happened, and then she took over. So my mother then became my pimp. So my mother herself, being mentally ill.
So she knew basically what happened.
She was doing it herself, and she was getting paid. So we're not talking about a normal mother. My mother was part of it. I tried to tell my mother what had happened when I was 6, in spite of being shown a body and being told I should never speak. and otherwise this is what's going to happen to me. In spite of that, I still tried to tell my mother, and then my mother ended up taking over from the cleaning lady and her husband. So I felt that it was my fault that this was happening because I told her. And so my mother was getting paid. That came out later. And when I was rescued from the network at age 11, initially I knew, because I was actually, my body was full of wounds from what had happened. And so I wasn't dissociated from what had happened, but my mother needed there to not have anything, her denial was so thick that it was like living in a totalitarian state with my mother as her awareness, she needed to believe that she was a good mother, and that meant that nothing was wrong with me. So the wounds were ignored as if they never existed. She would lie about it. I would try to get her on it. She would come back again with revenge, and that led her to sexually abuse me again. But okay, there just to get that control again. She sexually abused me again. And then the shame of that was so intense for me that I just went with her. Whatever she wanted, that was the reality. So I had this narrative of my mother's that I went with. That was then helping me too, because it's better for me if it's not true too. Mm. So, but my life was very difficult. I left very early. I left home at 15. I had a very difficult life. I was working in the red district at age 16. I wasn't sleeping with men, but I was there. I was naturally drawn to these places. And so I had a very difficult young adult life. And it was because the person inside the network who had gotten me out gave me instructions for life. And that in the beginning, that's what helped me. Don't remember anything was one of them, of course, but also don't buy drugs, don't do anything to get drugs, never sleep with anyone for money, never become a prostitute. They were very, very clear instructions that I was following that really saved my life in the beginning, because I would have fallen in every one of these traps. And he even said whom I should marry, a very precise profile of the man I should marry, which was not an older man that made his own money, but someone my age from a wealthy family, and preferably a family of New York bankers. So this is why I ended up in New York, and I'm actually still here. That was all because of these instructions. So I had an extremely difficult, challenging young adult life because I was extremely dissociated. I had programs that were constantly running, so I could only be comfortable, for example, one-on-one with a man. That meant that I was always getting jobs because I was tuning in and unconsciously seducing the men. When I was in an interview for a job, which was like a little menial job, I'd get the job, and then I couldn't do the job, or I was too dissociated to do the job. Then I got fired again. And then that's how I survived, from little job to little job. I left the country. And once I went into therapy, which was already in the 80s, I was getting flashbacks very early on. I was in therapy in the 80s. That once I was in therapy, what was happening was that when you have a memory that comes to you and you process that memory, that even though it may seem your life is getting worse because you're now starting to feel all these horrendous feelings of all the betrayals and all the pain and everything that was done to you that you couldn't feel when you were surviving, even though it may seem that your life is getting worse, you immediately feel, from the beginning, I felt the integration, the neural integration, as well as the wisdom that comes from that integration. And I knew that the insights I was receiving, that was what was worth it. And that is also the proof if you have a fantasy, if you make yourself believe that I was this or that happened to me, and this isn't true, which in the beginning, when you get a memory like that, you're like, no, this is not possibly true. It can't be true. Well, if it isn't true and you're going deeper into fantasy, you do not become a more whole person. You do not become more functional. The reason that I'm able to express myself as I am today is all because I've healed. And because the healing is this process that brings you closer and closer to truth. And that begins with your own truth, with the truth about yourself. I didn't want to believe that any of this was true. Of course, you never want to believe that you are such a victim. You want to be able to think that you're strong, even if it's not true, but that this did not happen to you. You don't want to believe that you were so humiliated. You don't want to believe that this is actually you. So the process of first getting the flashbacks and then considering them and then working with it, and the memory comes back. It's not like you get a nice timeline, and it's like a nice story of like, this is the beginning and that is the end. You get flashes.
You get thrown into this thing, and then the emotional part is coming back again, and your whole energy body is full of this stuff which happened in the past, and then the things coming back, and so on. Right?
Yes. And the only proof that you have at that point is that you're understanding yourself better. You can have cover memories, for example, things that you've always remembered, or your own behavior that didn't make sense. And suddenly you get the memory and you're like, now I understand that about me. Now I understand why I said that to my mother. Now I understand why she said that. There's all these things that start to make sense that maybe before didn't, or they were seen in a different context. So your life starts to make more sense. And yes, eventually, when you get into this kind of abuse for a long time, you may not be functional because it's so heavy. And I can tell you that many years, my life has been, extremely difficult. I don't wish it on anyone. To be feeling that much pain, to be feeling so much grief. I don't wish that on anyone, not even the perpetrators, to be feeling that pain. But as I'm feeling the pain, I'm gaining in wisdom, and that's the proof. And then there are things that from the memory I've gone to check. For example, there is a boy that tried to help me. When I was 11, when I was 10, he was 13, and when I was 11, he was 14. He tried to help me. He was from the outside. He came from a town that was actually not at all close to where I was living. And he tried to help me, and eventually he was killed for trying to help me. And I had spoken to him, and then I was,
How did he officially die?
He officially died of an accident, which is what the man who killed him told me. He died of an accident. I went to that town. I found his death record. I shouldn't have known. You see, this is not evidence that can be used in courts, because there is a boy and there's an official death record that he died of an accident, but I knew this boy and I knew where he lived. I found his home. I found his death record. That is, for me, is proof.
Die Frage habe ich nicht gestellt, weil ich dir nicht glaube, ja, weil ich sehe dich und ich fühle dich und ich habe genug Content und Videos von dir gesehen. Auch ein Tipp nur an alle, die zuhören. Ich möchte jetzt auch nicht alles schon mal Erzählte nochmal auspacken. Ich werde noch andere Podcasts einblenden, wo sie im Detail auf alles eingeht und so. Ich will halt meine persönlichen Fragen, die stellen, ja. Deswegen versuche ich auch da manchmal quer zu fragen. Wie bist du wieder rausgekommen? Ab wo ist der Punkt, wo du sagtest, ich bin draußen?
I was in Belgium, rescued by a young gangster named Patrick Hamers, who was extremely violent and who was my book, The Quest for Love, is really about that relationship with this young gangster who was 20 when I met him. And at age 11, I was going to be killed really because of him. He was extremely violent. Let's not, make him better than he is. He was, not at all so he abused me maybe more than anyone else had ever abused me. And because of him, I was going to be, and because I had spoken to the boy that was killed, on the outside, I was also going to be killed. And that was all because of this gangster, Patrick Hamers. Now, the last minute when the torture started, that was to kill me, he wasn't involved in that. He was just watching. I reached him. Then I looked him in the eyes and I reached him, and he had a change of heart. So I was taken away to continue this torture, which was in Belgium, by the way. It was in the house of that Minister of National Defense at the time, Paul van Winans, who was a man who was prime minister twice in Belgium. I was taken to a special room, a secret room with a butcher's block, where I was tied to this butcher's block and I was tortured. But while this happened, this gangster made a deal to get me out. And I write extensively about this in my book. This is what got me out. By the way, this deal eventually got him killed as well. Not right away, but his deal was that he was going to work for the politician in illegal, of course, secretly, in exchange for my life. Well, eventually that got him killed.
Warum, ich weiß, dass diese Frage bei so vielen aufkommt, die quasi die Zuseher sind von diesen Podcasts und so, warum eliminieren sie dich nicht? Why don't they just kill you? Why are you still alive? And I'm happy that you are, and I'll protect you with all I have, right? But
let's knock on wood first of all, okay? Let's just not mess with that idea too much. But firstly, the gangster, when I had a near-death experience, so I was dead. When I came back from the near-death experience, which was an absolutely glorious experience, but I was clinically dead.
Want to share the experience?
Well, it's also in my book, but let me answer your question at least first. We could maybe come back to it. But I had this the situation in which I was released. I had been tortured. There was a lot else that happened that night. I ended up dead on the floor, and the gangster was now left there. He had to clean up. When I came back to life, everybody was gone. The way that I know this gangster, I could not imagine that he would go and tell them that I was actually alive and that he brought me home. So first of all, I think that the people in the Belgian network believed that I was dead. The people from the global elite network, where I was 1 year, they had put so much programmation in me to kill myself and also to never be successful, that they probably felt that that was sufficient.
They have you anyway, right? So they don't need to worry or something.
Well, there's something else there. Why they wouldn't have killed. I have asked the question very many times when David Rockefeller was done with me. And this was, for 1 year, I was being prepared to be part of it. And then I was going to get a platform. I was being trained to be famous in France. While this was all happening, I was being faced increasingly with what that meant. So while I was suddenly being treated much better, and everybody was nice to me, whereas in Belgium, everybody was treating me like a piece of dirt. And now everybody's nice to me. And I'm, these men those men on the world stage are now acting like it's an honor to spend time with me. So I've become a high-class prostitute, from a throwaway child to a high-class prostitute, of 10 years old. So because I was treated so differently, I was going along a lot more, but it involves so much more than that. And so after 1 year, I was done and I rebelled. And then I was kicked out of that, what I call the inner circle. Now, the first thing that was done when David Rockefeller took an interest in me is that my blood was drawn.
That was a question I had before, but didn't ask. I think it's because of the bloodlines and your ancestry.
My ancestry. So my bloodline isn't spectacular at all, but I didn't know who my father was, but my mother did. So I assumed that my blood was drawn, plus they went and asked via to my mother who my father was. And my father comes from a line of Huguenots. Mm-hmm. Which are French, small aristocracy, or they were aristocrats and they went to Holland and then they ended, he ended up in Belgium. And also generations of artists and musicians. And so I think based on that information and based on the fact that there was some nobility in that bloodline, they said, okay, she can belong. I think that was the first entry point. Because I had that blood, I could belong. And then because they were classical musicians, I was going to be a singer. And because they were, this bloodline.
Royal blood? Or the different type of royal bloods?
Who knows? I really don't know. But that's what I think happened. That's why, but that was the first entry level. Like if I had not had this blood, then I don't think I could have been part of it. So that was the first thing. So I think that in his case, when I rebelled, that had something to do with the fact that I wasn't killed. That he somehow felt that I belonged on the inside because of my blood, not on the outside. In the Belgians, they did not care about that at all. Paul van den Boeynants, who was the politician who was in charge himself, came from a butcher's family. He started out as a butcher. So he didn't care about any of that. And he was also not a Satanist. He was not what I call a true believer Satanist. He did all the same things, but without believing. So he was a sadist, indefinite,
Ja, aber es gibt Unterschiede einfach zwischen diesen Dingen, ja.
There is a difference, yeah.
Different levels of, satanity
Yeah, there's a difference that there's those who believe in Satan and consciously ask for demons and dark spirits to enter, that invite them to take over their body while they do horrific things.
Artists like Beyonce
offer sacrifices to Satan also.
I mean, there is so much proof of that. Beyonce, for example, don't want to make any accusations or something, but she's telling when I'm on the stage, something else comes through. It's called Tasha in her thing, and there are people who it's not like they are summoning and they're in contact and they're believing and connecting to different type of energies in different realms, right? Or am I wrong? And I've taken too much ayahuasca in Peru and stuff like that to know how things work on a not like a little scale, like 2% or something, right? Because it's so
well. What I can tell
big.
you is that I saw people transform physically. That clearly that's not the human being. Clearly that's not. It's you. It's your physique, but you would look. You would have expressions, and that are just not human anymore. And that is what I observed. I didn't see any great transformations, like physical things change. I didn't see that, but I saw people becoming completely inhuman and as if they were taken over by another entity. That's for sure.
I had one occasion. I don't want to go into details, but I I met so many people in different, like in politics and here and there, and in orders and Freemasons, and I met them all, or maybe all. And I had one situation where a woman was talking to me. We were arguing about something, and then it went click, and I could feel that there was a presence behind her, like 3 or 4 meters, and she was speaking in a different language fluently, in an old language, trying to einschüchtern, intimidate me or something, right? But then I spoke back with my language, or my type of spontaneous, so why did I even tell you this? But
Well, that's what Satanists do consciously. That's how the occult works. It's using the subtle forces out there. When we are seeking light, we are looking to those beings that are of a higher vibration, so that we can evolve as human beings. So what Satanists do is they call on the lower vibrational beings. These are intelligences separate from us,
like
are,
programs,
and they call on them to get ultimately the power, material goods. I mean, it's always the same. I've never felt as seen and understood as when I was sitting with a Rothschild who had observed me for a few minutes and immediately saw exactly what it was that I needed the most, which was respect. And he started our conversation by promising that I would receive respect. And then after that, all the material things that they can offer, the fame, the biggest houses, the best cars, the yacht. I was promised all this when I was 9 years old in a conversation where I was being invited and had to give my will. And so obviously in that situation, I said yes. And then a year later, I realized
out of fear, or out of the thing that you were going to get something better.
Of course, I did not feel fear in that moment. I should have, but I didn't.
No, you can't at this point with 9 years, or you can't. You just, there's no connection.
No. This is not an abuse situation. See, this was David Rockefeller had picked me out, and I had spent several weeks in triage. So even though there was a lot of sexual abuse, it was about training now. Sexual abuse was training. But also, I was being treated very nicely compared to before. He was seeing what my talents were. But meanwhile, he was getting me used to, he was taking me to his own homes, one in this mansion in Westchester, his home in New York City, and then also a home in Maine, near Bar Harbor. And I was being introduced to the lifestyle, the food, the clothes, how to eat, how to recognize the good cotton from the cheap. I was getting an education, and at the same time, for example, we would stand in front of a painting, and he would let me speak. We spoke French. He spoke French to me. I spoke French to him. And he would let me speak about the painting. So he was actually repairing my ability that I have an eye for art. And I know that this ability would have been used inside the network, that I was trained for something inside the network where I would have a platform as a singer, an actress, but ultimately I would also bring people in, artists, because of my eye. I would draw artists to me and I would bring them into the network. You see, artists that are independent, that are truly talented, I would repair their talent, and then I would be their mentor and bring them into the network, so that they would belong to the network and they would be controlled. So that was a job I was receiving from the inside, but it was all about, he was looking at me, he was seeing things in me, and I felt, for me, seen and heard for the first time in my life.
What did you see in him?
Well, he was like for me, I didn't know who he was, right? I didn't know that this was a Rockefeller. I didn't barely know that name, but I probably had heard the name, but that name never came up. And I should say something about that, because he took me shopping on Madison Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
It is not considered classy to use the name of a famous person when you're around them. You're not supposed to say the name. You're supposed to treat them like they're a god. And you're supposed to give them everything that they want. And you're supposed to treat them like special, but you're not supposed to, you're never. You're supposed to know who they are and treat them that way, but not say the name, because that's considered, it's considered low class. So everybody knows that. Everybody knew that, you know, nobody ever said the name, but they were all treating him like he was a gift from God. So what he was to me was like a father, an incestuous father. You know, he was seeing me like I'd never been seen. And then when we together were with Rothschild saw even more, and he saw even deeper.
Cool.
So for me, I felt really happy as a child, you know, to grow up emotionally. You need to be seen. You need to be accepted for who you are. That's what I was experiencing.
With that type of history as well. I mean, it's a completely contrast emotionally. So ich spreche in Deutsch nochmal. Ich finde es so, ich glaube, die Menschen müssen verstehen, es gibt auch verschiedene Arten von Mind-Controlling. Da gibt es so dieses CIA, Mind-Control, LSD-Ding, aber Mind-Controlling oder die Programmierung eines Verstandes geht sehr einfach, und ich sehe das, ich bin selbst Mental- und Bewusstseinstrainer seit vielen, vielen Jahren, und ich sehe es an meinem Sohn, der 6 Jahre alt ist, wie er sich entwickelt, wie er die Welt wahrnimmt und dekodiert in seinem Gehirn. Und die Macht, die ich habe, ihm zu sagen, vor dem sollst du Angst haben oder auch nicht, nur durch die verbale Sprache, nicht durch Torturen und nicht durch Qualen, oder es ist so fragile, so heilig und so. Und das verstehen viele auch unbewusst nicht, deswegen sind so viele Kinder etwas schwierig. Aber ja, es ist sehr einfach, ein Kind so zu manipulieren, halt wie du manipuliert wurdest, ja.
Yes, of course. And children, you know, are used in the network because for a pedophile, you see, I was punished. And this happened, so the first time when I was taken to the network, I stood up against them. So then I get threatened, you know, with you're gonna die, and here we mean it. We are serious about when we say you're gonna die when you speak out. Then I spoke out anyway to my mother. Now, the mind control that I had, there was a part of my training that was official mind control. So I was sent to Heidelberg in Germany under the auspices of Dr. Hans Hamsen.
Who created Pro Familia, by the way, for everybody who wants to Google it.
He was the founder with Margaret Sanger of Pro Familia. Now, Hans Hamsen was in charge of the mind control in this small facility in Heidelberg, which was a villa very close to the Schloss in Heidelberg. And it was mostly happening in the basement there. And he was extremely cruel, and he was so there were 3 handlers there, young men from, I think, from the East. Frankly, I don't think they were from Western Germany. They were young men from the East. They were just about 20 years old, 3 young men that were basically in charge. That mind control training, which lasted 1 month, that was the official, which people say MK Ultra, it's more like that. I was there the whole time, and I was being tortured for very specific purposes. So there was no experimentation happening like there would have been in the camps. This was like, no. David Rockefeller, and together with Rothschild, had decided, okay, she's going to be this persona. She's going to become that kind of sex slave. elite sex slave to the elite. She's going to attract the most powerful men in the world for me. So for that, therefore she needs to be famous. And so what was done there was so scientific.
Can you give me some examples? Because I'm very interested in the techniques, how they do it, because most people can't comprehend it. Can you give me some example? Because I'm really researching the brain and stimulus as well. What can you...
Okay, well, there's one I talk about a lot, which has to do with being forced to watch films and then being basically choked or drowned when I get the answer wrong, and then that choking and drowning gets me.
Oh, so
then I lose consciousness. Gotcha. And I actually become more intuitive and get the answers more easily. But I want to talk about a different one because I think I don't speak about it that often, but it's for a German-speaking audience, it's maybe interesting because the Theta-Training, so there's different parts of the training. And so this is the Theta-Training, the Theta part of the training. I was put in a saltwater tank.
In a floating tank, like you use for meditation.
Well, this tank, the salt water was warm, but it was deep enough that had I fallen asleep, I would drown. Or of course, if I panicked, then I would also drown. So I had to stay awake. I was weightless and awake. And I had been given a picture of who ended up being Kurt Kiesinger. I didn't know his name. Kurt Kiesinger was the former chancellor in Germany. And I had to focus on him. And I already, could tell from the previous training that he was a pedophile. He liked girls my age, that he had a soft spot, but I didn't really know what it was. And then I had to focus on him. So now I believe that there were people with him at this time to check my answers. But I had to enter into his body-mind system, into his consciousness. And then apparently I was told he has already heard about you. So someone told him about me from the network. And I was sold as the next hot ticket inside the network, this child that's going to be famous. And I could tell, I was reporting now that his weakness is that he's afraid. He was afraid because he was older now. He was not the chancellor anymore. He was older. There was some humiliation around, because he was slapped in the face and all that. That was fair. So he was afraid that he was aging out, and there was something. He believed himself to be a good man, and he didn't understand that he wasn't ruthless enough, believe it or not, to be, even though he had been a Nazi, he wasn't ruthless enough to really be growing in the network. So he was sort of on the way out, and he was feeling that, and he was very afraid to lose this, but he didn't know what he could do to come back. And so I was sold to him as, oh, if you have her and she, you're with her, she's going to be really big and she'll get you back in. So I had to now enter into his, so I was receiving flashes of his, what he smells, like I could smell coffee sometimes,
so
or I could hear
it's
sound.
like remote viewing, right? With Uri Geller and the remote viewing project Stargate and all of this to consciously connect to him, right?
But it's more than remote viewing, because it's like I had to insert my consciousness into his and manipulate his thoughts.
Like Inception. Do an Inception type of thing.
It is.
I met people. I don't want to call any names, and nobody would know them anyway. But he was telling me there are people in the Bundesnachrichtendienst in Germany, like the secret. What's the English word? Secret service. And he said, look, I met he met like the leader from Skull and Bone Europe, which happened to be in this group, and he said, look, he has a star on both hands, his lines, and he can do some kind of rituals, and if he concentrates on you and has a picture to connect or something, right, like stimuli from this person, he can just, basically if they have a group of 3 or 5 people who concentrate on you, you're going insane and jump out of the window because they can insert you any thoughts or things. You
have to be very careful that the thoughts that you're thinking are your own. And,
Thank you. Thank you.
You know, and of course, thoughts are never
How
fully
you know?
your own.
How you know, by the way, for everybody who says, okay,
That's
how
right.
you know?
Well, I think that's where spiritual practices are very important, that you heal and you can focus on positive thoughts. And that when you know that you have a negative thought, that there is something that you can heal. Or when you know you are triggered and you have an emotional reaction, a negative emotional reaction, that it's something in you that needs to be healed. Because what I was taught to do with Kurt Kiesinger was I first had to find his weakness. But what is his weakness? This is in the network, it's called a weakness. In a tough world, it's called weakness. But in a healing world, it's called a vulnerability. And it's his blind spot from his own trauma that he hasn't healed. So the fact that he wanted to belong, and the fact that he thought he was good and he wanted to belong to this club, came from his own insecurities, from his own unhealed childhood wound. And I was trained to come and pretend to be
the one who makes the healing for him or help him.
Yeah, to soothe that. While, of course, so that's how these men would fall in love with me. Because obviously these men that need so much power, they're all extremely traumatized. Otherwise, you don't need that power. These are extremely deeply insecure men. Otherwise, you don't need to be on the top of the world. There is no need to have that much money or power unless you are making up for something that you're missing inside, which is your self-esteem. And the self-esteem comes through the healing. And the self-esteem comes through your connection to spirit. So connection to spirit is extremely important. And self-awareness is extremely important, that you can always look at yourself and be honest, be honest with yourself. That's what these men, none of these people can do that. They're all cowards, in the network, it's all cowardice. So I was literally trained to go into his blind spot, that's to say his unhealed trauma, and I was doing that from a distance.
And he recognized it. Did you ever talk to him? Did you meet him in person afterwards?
I did, but first I had to, again, how it works, the mind control works. So I'm doing this now to another person. I'm getting taught to do this all from a tank, by the way, where I didn't sleep probably for days. So you get into a weightless state for very many days. You can't sleep. So it puts you into different states, and it actually really increases your ability to be psychic.
I have been in a floating tank. I know this one, but not where you can completely drown. I know a normal floating tank where you float.
Yeah, but you
meditate.
haven't been in it for days either, have you?
No. Right. Just for half an hour.
So that's the torture part where, they go and take you so much farther because you need to, that is what brings these special gifts out. So you have to, the way that you are being forced is that what is created is urgency. So I had to get into his wound, his fear that he wasn't going to belong. And then I had to create urgency. So he has a fear. Now I come in there in that fear and I say, you need to do it now. You need to do it now. You need to be with her. Otherwise you're going to lose out. And she's going to be with other people and you'll never see her again. So I was creating. So first and you see on a mass scale, there's the mass mind control, you go into people's fear and then you create urgency, like this needs to happen now. And when you're being put in a state of urgency, you don't think at all anymore. You just follow orders.
Yeah,
So
Reptile
this
here
is what-
comes online, and the whole COVID stuff. You see it's the human mind is pretty simple actually, like really simple with such type of commands or prompts.
That's yes. So I had to do that to him, and then in the following year. So I was in Heidelberg in the summer of '72. The whole month of August of '72, I was there. Then after that, I was sent back home to Belgium, back with my mother and my stepfather, and normal family life, going to school. And then I was taken to Germany by Belgian handlers very often, and then we would go. I was in this little hotel pension with Kurt Kiesinger, and it would just be me and him, and in one room. And these people were so glad. They felt so honored to welcome Kurt Kiesinger. And I didn't speak German, but I knew how to stay in the background, and no one ever asked. If they would have asked, I would be his niece, but nobody ever asked what I was doing there. Oh, right, I was
Must be
sleeping in the
normal.
same bed. Yeah, he didn't try to hide anything. Sometimes they had a little cot, like the cot, but he just took me in the bed, and then they never even messed up the cot to make it look like I slept in the cot. Never had to do that. So he loved Germany. He really loved the country Germany, and so I actually ended up loving the country Germany because I saw so many beautiful places, often by the river, little hotel pension on the river. There's certain smells and everything that I have strangely good memories of that.
Why strangely? It's totally normal. How you program yourself, or how you copy the experiences. It's not strange.
So he was a pedophile, and obviously you can say that he's not a good man. And at the same time, he had a little bit of goodness in him. And the network, they don't have, most of the people in the network, they don't even believe that you can be innocent. They don't even believe in innocence or goodness. They think that everybody who thinks they're good is lying. But he had a little bit in him, and that's what made him naive.
Lass mich versuchen, das kurz runterzubrechen und zusammenzupacken, ob ich es richtig verstanden habe. Gut? Das bedeutet, es gibt weltweit verschiedene Arten von Netzwerken. Es gibt pädophile Netzwerke, satanistisch angehauchte, die verschiedene Arten von Identitäten channeln oder anbeten oder halt denen Präsente machen. Dieses scheint auf politischer Ebene, auf allen Machtstrukturebenen zu funktionieren. Ob die Menschen selbst freiwillig sind, um ihre eigenen Dinge zu stillen oder unter Druck gesetzt werden, geblackmailt werden oder sonstiges. Aber das ist so ein Grip of Control sozusagen, oder?
Yeah, that is it. And the network consists of
conspiracy theory, and I can hear it and scream already in the background,
Yeah, because in Austria, I work with some survivors in Austria, and it's very bad there. And even to the point that this false memory is getting new life in Austria, while this has been completely found out to be the hoax that it is here in the United States. This is long gone, because it's really not based on anything real. And dissociation is real, but so Austria is pretty thick in that way.
What did you hear about Austria? Can you share some insights? I think since you are working,
people, so I know that the network's pretty active there. But I want to answer your other question, that how the network operates, and maybe. So there's small networks everywhere. Like each town can have a few people even that are part of this satanic network. It's essentially satanic. So there can be just a few people that have a few positions, one lawyer, one judge, and one police chief or something, that are in just one little town. And so they keep the control already in their way, like there's going to be some corrupt police, there's going to be, some cases of even just sexual abuse. They get off because the lawyer is going to make sure that the perpetrators get off. And often perpetrators get a break if they offer their children. You see, then if their children can be used in an organized manner, then that's how some children end up in the network, because their incestuous father was caught by police, and then they go in. And so it happens on a very small level. And so these people obviously want power. They're very big on knowledge. So often the Freemasons, for example, who are really big on all what is knowledge, but not no heart, but everything had knowledge. That is one society that then culminates often in, you know, people connecting to other networks, and then to the bigger town networks, and then from the bigger town networks we have the Belgian national network, which I was thrown in right away because it's a very small country, so it became the Belgian national network. And then they connected to the global core, what I call the inner circle, which was where Rothschild, David Rockefeller, and a lot of celebrities at that time, a lot of politicians at that time, they were connected to the global elite network, which is satanic also, and which comes through Masonry. It can come through the Church, the Vatican. It can come through the Jesuits. It can come through various secret societies, organizations, Opus Dei.
Which we have here in Vienna, and there are lots of connections with our ex-chancellor and stuff like that.
Yes, and so those societies have lots of members that are completely unaware of what happens at the top levels. So you have, like with the Masons, you have Masons that up to the 33rd degree don't know what that means, the 33rd degree. And then there's people that will stay in the 32nd degree their whole lives because they don't understand what it really means to be in the 33rd. So once you get the 33rd, then the jesters and so forth. So this is really where it goes to do as thou wilt. So I think the group I was in, they were particularly prone to the teachings of Aleister Crowley and the do as thou wilt, which comes from, you know, the idea that you can then do anything, and anything when you have everything, and you can do anything. There is no reason that it should be so dark, you know. If you can do anything when you have everything, you would think that what you would do is end hunger, you know, end world hunger, end war. But instead, the reason that we can't change anything in the world is because this secret is not unveiled yet. And it will need to be aware that it really exists. And this awareness alone, I think, will change things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's very important that we are speaking about this whole topic, because the truth, whatever the truth is, I have no idea what the real truth is, but these things need to get out. And from my own research, I think maybe it's too soon for this, but there is a spiritual component to all of these things, all of these rituals. Like, okay, there is pedophile, and you go the ladder up, and then there's the pedophile stuff and the dark stuff, but there are different layers as well, which are in different dimensions or different. And I had if I could share this to you, I was while I was in Peru, we did a ceremony with the shamans there, and there was a point, the other boy was screaming in pain suddenly, and the whole room just dropped vibrationally. Everything was quiet, like not a sound somewhere, and I can only describe it as the Lord of Darkness himself was in this room, and I could feel it. Like I knew what it was, what the function was, and I could feel his respect for me, which was completely insane. And I was like, okay, we recognized each other, but he can't defeat me, and it's not about the fight. You can't win if you fight the darkness, because it's the other part of the story. And then I realized, okay, fuck, we all need to forgive them. Like all of them. Like it might sound crazy, and a lot of people can't comprehend it yet, but it's like I see it for me personally, and I'm not involved and have this type of experience you have, but I think ultimately as a collective, that's the great test. Can you forgive them for what they did? and we don't even know why they are doing it in the first place and why they had to do their part of the story or play their role in the whole cosmic game. You know what I mean?
Well, if you understand yourself completely, you'll understand why they do it, because it is indeed a spiritual matter. And you know, the fact that there is choice. You know, I was asked to give my will when I was 9 years old to Rothschild, and I did at that time because I didn't know any better. But you have to give your will actually 5 times.
Okay.
And the following year, I did not give my will, and then that was the end of that. You see.
What happened if you when you said when you said no? What happened? What was the reaction? Did you get?
That was my rebellion, and that's when I was completely kicked out of the inner circle. My plans completely changed, and I was reprogrammed in. So I wasn't killed, and I said, as I mentioned earlier, it took a long time for me to understand why I wasn't just killed when I rebelled, but instead I was reprogrammed. I was thrown in a cage, and then I was drugged, and so I was humiliated in the cage. I was chained up in a dungeon and programmed to make me feel, and I was told in no uncertain terms, that I was worthless, that I didn't deserve any success, and this was very gross. Everything was very gross, and because I was left there so long with a lot of gross stuff, I believed that I did believe that I was worthless. And then eventually I was just picked up by the Belgians. So I went through this reprogrammation, which was torture for 3 days. And this was, by the way, in a place in Germany somewhere where it was an official building. That's all I know. It was 1973. And it was maybe May or something, May, and around then in 1973. It was an official building. There were 2 basement levels. So I was in the cage, a hanging cage in the basement level. But the other people there, the other prisoners, were adults. That was next to a young adult who was also being taken downstairs to be tortured. So when I was downstairs in these dungeons, I was chained to the wall and tortured there. And in these dungeons, I heard people scream, but they were not children. So people were being tortured there in 1973 that were not children, that were being interrogated and that were being tortured. And so I was, from what I could hear and see, the only child there. But I was basically reprogrammed to make sure that I would never feel that I would become a star on my own accord. You know, I was going to be a star. I had this whole life. In great detail, it was explained to me what my life was going to be like in extremely great detail. So I knew everything that was going to happen.
They
I
wrote
was
a
going
script, like a script.
Yeah. Yes, and I know these people that did do that, you know, because there's a small group. I was being trained by a particular famous French singer, composer, and his wife was a singer also. And I was going to be singing in this style, very specific to me, more classical songs, but I was going to sing them in this very sexual way. So I knew which group I was going to belong to and everything. I knew how I was going to be treated. I knew where I was going to live. I mean, you know, the city and what it was going to feel like and look like.
Like they're programming a whole identity.
Yeah. That was my persona that was being created. And then as this young child singer, and then afterwards young adult woman singer actress, I was going to be sold. So you know, you raise the price. If you sell somebody who is a star, you know, you're making millions. You're not making a few thousand. You know what I mean? So already, I think Kurt Kiesinger was my guinea pig. That was part of my training. And that was fine. Everything was good. We were all set to go. And it was really the ritual that was to be my official entry into the network where I decided, no, not doing it. And that rebellion then ended up costing me, this reprogrammation. But then I was just pushed back to the Belgian network. And then I spent another year and a half in the Belgian network until the young gangster finally got me out. But I forget what question I was answering to you, because it was really about...
It's not important.
No, yes, it is.
It's just the thing which...
There might be people, especially Germanic people, that are still thinking about what I started to talk about, and they're like, hey, I want to know what that was. Oh, the spiritual. There, I remember. You were talking about the spiritual level. So Satanism is using occult, which is the perversion of spirituality, to invite dark forces. And, like you had this experience with, Satan, or a representative that is all about keeping you. It is said that Satan reigns this realm because this is obviously a realm of duality, of dark and light. So Satan's job is to try to pull us down so that we will remain on the material level. And all the perpetrators, for all their occultism, they're very materialistic, obviously. And then we have this greed, that they have this incredible greed that it's not enough to have several $billion. They need more. They need everything and need to control everything. So it's really a mental illness. It's the people that are ruling the world are completely insane because they are purely materialistic ultimately, and they're completely narcissistic. So they're the least fit to rule. But ultimately, what is needed is the connection to spirit to get out of it. The reason that I stood up when I was 6 years old, and the reason that I said, no, I'm not doing this, is because I was already also receiving help, by the way, spiritually. While I was being tortured, I often received some kind of help. So there's something in me that was connected still to spirit. And I think it's our innocence that is our spiritual self. And in the network, they try to kill that innocence. And then you don't believe that you're a spiritual being anymore, and you lose connection to spirit. And that's the network. Then you can open your mind and you can connect to dark
forces,
entities, but you cannot connect to yourself as spirit. And yourself as spirit, that's not the body. It's not the body-mind system. It's not your thoughts. It is beyond. And that self that is beyond, the consciousness of you, that divine spark that is beyond who we apparently are, that is where we have to go. And this is happening already. This is already, you can just tell that we are coming into a higher age from the Middle Ages, for example. The fact that all this technology has been found is because we're in touch with subtler energies.
Or given to us, like the AI thing and all the stuff which is coming right now. That's a lot of things.
Right now, all the technology is perverted because it's all used for controlling us, rather than that we all use this technology to make our lives easier. But eventually we won't even need this technology anymore, because we'll have the mind capacity to connect, like we're being taught inside the network. But it's all about the biggest quality that is missing in people that are in the network is humility. And someone who is truly humble is someone who has to be very connected to spirit, because then you have nothing to prove.
Yep.
And so that's what I pray for, that I'm just following my intuition and following spirit. I do my practice, I meditate, I pray. I have, deep faith and I have a part to play, you know, and I'm just going to play it, whatever it is. It's not what I wanted from the ego, I can tell you that. I'd rather not be talking about this subject.
Who thought about this at the beginning? Did I choose this for myself, or that's a lot of things I question myself on a lot of like occasions. Oh wow! Let me just wrap my head around all of this input. It's so fascinating because I'm really good in like projecting myself into other people or stories or experiences, and I think you have, and I think they know, it's regarding about your, not your blood, but your type of energy, and that's, I think, why you are guarded or shielded from different type of energies.
I don't hate anyone.
In a positive...
I certainly do not hate these people. I'm not doing this for revenge. I know there's a lot of people that are, you know, have attached themselves to this cause and think that this is a war. No, I think we want to just get away from war.
That's the point. Exactly, that's the point. Because I tried in German, okay? Because
okay.
Ich hatte mal vor längerer Zeit einen Podcast mit jemandem und da kam das Thema auf, weil ich behauptet habe, was wäre denn, wenn jetzt ein Rothschild wirklich zu sich finden würde und sagt, nur als Beispiel der Name Rothschild, ja, sorry, wenn er zu sich finden würde und sagt, ich will mein Gewissen reinwaschen, zu wem soll er gehen? Zur Polizei? Zu Beamten, zu irgendwelchen Politikern, Organisationen, soll er vielleicht zu alternativen Medien gehen, die Geschichte dann hochbringen, ihnen wird sowieso keiner glauben. Und würden alle Leute den dann umbringen oder feiern? Weil wenn jetzt jemand kommt und sagt, I'm so sorry, I killed, I'm sorry, what would they do? They would, it's like Jesus, like hang him on the cross. And it's the same thing. It's the same repeating pattern on a conscious level. And that's the reason why they are not coming out. And I can feel it. There are so many people who would love to like speak up, like really get it off their soul and the chest. Not only the victims, but the perpetrator and all of them. But where should they go? What should they do? What kind of advice can we give everybody who is involved, like in an active way? What would be the advice for them? Like write an email or start praying?
That's about spirit, of course. Yes, pray. Yes, I know. I feel it too. I feel that there are a lot of people who are stuck in the network, but really don't want to be there anymore. If for no other reason that they're on the way out and they're not winning anymore, which is why a lot of people wanted to belong, because they were just top of the top. Once it's exposed, it's really not fun anymore. And a lot of people never wanted to be killers. They never wanted to do this. You know, you get pulled in, and okay, that you don't have the strength one time to say no, and then you end up stuck, you know. So to all these people, at the moment, really the only place they have to go is they have to surrender to spirit. You know, find Christ or a Yogananda, but someone, a figure.
Reconnect with yourself.
Or the unconditional love that is the divine mother in the universe, the divine intelligence that is running everything. Without spirituality, you know, it's true they have nowhere to go. That is true. They're all lonely, by the way. All of them are lonely because it's not like they're friends together. It's all fake. They can't be friends. They're not mature. They can't have mature friendships. They're all spying on each other, you know? So all they have is the surrender to spirit, and whatever that means. You know, I am very intuitive. So I did this podcast with on PDB podcasts recently.
Saw this one.
It was immediately clear that I had to do it. And then I prepared spiritually. I prepared for it because it wasn't going to. When I was invited, from my ego, I would not have said yes. But it was yes. I have to. So it was clear I had to do it. And then it was a matter of preparing, spiritually preparing to do it. And then, look what happened. It's not only is it going viral, but everyone is, it's like his resistance is getting people to connect with me more. So yes, I was supposed to do that, and I did it. So I am very intuitive, and that intuition is the voice of God. It is the voice of truth that is deep inside, that is the quietest voice. So yes, prayer, meditation. When you've done a lot of harm, it's very difficult to redeem yourself. It's very difficult to acknowledge first, because there's the issue of guilt and shame. When you are abused as a child, you're being shamed. You're taking on shame that does not belong to you. So this shame is imposed. Because this shame and guilt are imposed, it is unbearable. You can't go through life feeling that you are the shameful being, because in fact you are a child of God. You are light. So the people go to the dark side so as not to feel that shame that was originally imposed on them. And as they go to the dark side, they do a lot of things that would actually require for them to feel shame to heal from it. So to feel the shame in the beginning for a perpetrator is not only will they feel the shame of what they've done, but they will feel the shame that was imposed on them that doesn't belong with them. And it may, well, it's like,
I know what you mean.
A container crashing on your head, it's very heavy. So I want to just say to those who might be listening that,
and you can be sure there are some who will listen.
I don't know, but
I hope so. I hope so. Maybe we can help them.
But it is all about surrender, which is a very difficult word for people who want the control. But it is surrender to the greater truth. If you connect with truth, you are connecting to God. It's when you stay with truth that will go ultimately to the truth about you. It will go to the truth in the world. It will bring your intuition, which is the voice of truth. You don't have to believe in God. You can just follow truth. And then this will take you there. But it is lonely. And I just want to say, it is lonely. That's why you need spirit. Because there is no person in the world. I mean, sometimes I work with perpetrators, I do. But at the moment, what is happening is that this cause is, the right is trying to own this cause and say, we're the ones that are bringing it out. So that means these people on the right, they're saying, get those perpetrators and kill them.
That's what I mean. Yeah, exactly.
Right. That's exactly what we don't need.
Yeah, agreed.
That comes from a place of unhealed trauma, where your own anger towards your own people who hurt you when you were little, you still want revenge. That's where you're lacking in understanding and you're lacking in maturity. And that's where the perpetrators come from. When they lash out, you are trained in the network. You're abused and humiliated, and you have to take it. And then they give you one outlet to release all of that frustration, and it's destructive. So that's what happens. And if we want to do that in the world, then we're just like them. So if we want to be different, we have to look at ourselves and heal ourselves.
Nothing more I can add to that. That's exactly the way how I saw it a few years ago. That's if God is watching, or whatever you want to call it, spirit, that's exactly the way it should be. I think most of the people, not only the victims, but the listener or the everybody at home, who is hearing this and then getting angry. You should kill him. They touch our children. Okay. Yes, you are right from your feeling about right and wrong, but your action need to be really like you need to be very careful about your thoughts and your action, because then you're not the devil wins, you know. He wants to get
Yes.
been
Obviously,
fighted.
there are people who belong in prison.
Of course, I don't want to save
right.
them. Get me right.
Right.
I don't want, like, we have rules and every.
No, but I am saying this because this comes at me a lot, that I am protecting them. No, it is really necessary to do what is necessary, but not kill.
Yeah. Let me just have a small sneak peek about my topics I wrote down and not asked all. We talked about what do you think? Can I throw in some names and your perspective? Because I think you've worked with a lot of victims, and I think you have a really good understanding.
I can't do that. I can only speak about the people that abused me. I have heard a lot of names over the years working with victims, but I would never reveal those names.
I don't want names. I don't want that you say names, but am I right that you have a really good overview and inside view regarding names of victims and so on? I mean, you should have a really big network.
I work with victims all day long, so I hear a lot.
So why or how can we set up some kind of international whatever to bring this whole topic? And or are you going this way, or you don't want to go this way because it's not your path? You know what I mean?
That's not my path. Yeah, that's not my path.
Did you find someone whose path it is already, or what do we need?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
Because lots of people, and I talked with some and said, yeah, I'm gonna have this interview, and wow, I have no idea why she's choosing me, and I have the agreement, but
I don't know either. You know, it's intuitive.
Thank you very much.
Since the interview on PDB podcast, I've had a lot of requests.
Okay, thank you very much. Or thanks to Spirit, because I had the same feeling when I watched your eyes and your reaction, and it's like on a deeper. And I get this calling to contact you, then I need to talk to you, and then normally it works, you know, because I'm doing the right stuff. But what do you think is needed at the moment? Because I'm not the one, like my special ability is to make the transition or make the translator to some people, but I'm not the one who's doing it, because then I'm in so much stuff already. But do we need an organization, or do we need someone like an email, like write an email, or what do you think? What could we do?
My mission is this. My mission is this, is first of all, you know, the revelation part, which is telling my story, and telling my story in a way that people can understand that this is real. That is part one of my mission. But the second part of my mission, which is what excites me a lot more, is that I've developed a healing modality for everyone that is called the unconditional model. And I've been teaching that for years already. I already traveled around the world to teach it to therapists, but it really is for everyone. And it is based on my unique experiences, of course, with power, and then power dynamics. And it says, the basis is that we all are caught in this toxic power paradigm. How do we get out? Because how do we participate without realizing in this toxic power paradigm? Because this is not a thing that exists separate from us. It's existing also because of us. So how do we participate? So one way that we participate, and I say, is that it's a toxic power structure, that the people at the top are the ones that are evading healing and that are putting their trauma onto everyone below, where the people at the bottom are going to be the least privileged, let's say, the ones, the disenfranchised, are going to have, the children are going to suffer the most in this paradigm. And privilege in this sense is an invitation, a tool to keep the division standing, because it invites you get a privilege, you don't do anything for it, you have the privilege, and it invites you to think that you deserve something when you don't, to think that you're better, to not look deeper in yourself and to uncover your truth and your pain and your trauma. And basically, when we look up to people and we give our power away, we can look up to people that are more powerful and richer than us and think that they are better than us somehow, which is what the power paradigm suggests. But we could also look up to teachers, or we can look up to this person and that person. It may not follow the paradigm, but we're doing it anyway. We're giving our power away here. We're thinking this person is great. And then on the other side, so this is when we project power upward and we give our power away. And we think we are taking this person, we are making them into an authority figure, which is really saying that it is a representative. We're putting ourselves in the role of the child, and we're making somebody that authority figure is really a representative of our own childhood. And it's something that's not resolved with that authority figure from childhood when we put ourselves in the role of a child as an adult. And then when we know that, we can go to that projection, and then I have developed these exercises to go and look at that, what that really means and how we can heal from that. And then on the other end, we look down on certain people. Like when the moment we have a value judgment over someone, like you're saying, you know, there's no need to kill people because then we're taking part in the same cycle. So I'm saying, okay, well, when you feel the desire to kill someone, you're projecting down. Or when you say this person should
for you.
You're projecting down on them. And this can be, you know, you could be projecting down on the elites, or you can project down on the poor, you know, whatever it is, you're projecting down somehow. And that projection is a value judgment where you give yourself the power and you place yourself in the role of the authority. And, you know, so this, again, is another entry into your own unresolved trauma. Negative projection, positive projection, doesn't matter. It's all power dynamics. So it really is a model that works to create extreme awareness of all the different power dynamics and how it relates to our own personal trauma. And so we can heal our trauma in the context of changing the world.
Wow. Where where are you giving this? Are you giving the lectures, or is there a webinar, or is it a private session, or how can people?
I've had several online courses for that. I'm going to be coming to Holland in February to do a 2-day workshop on this.
You want to come to Austria as well? You want to come to Austria as well?
Well, it's not part of the plan for now, but maybe we can talk about that for the future. But I am starting, so I have been doing these in-depth courses with my business partner, Christina Merkley, where they're 10-week courses so that you really can get an in-depth view of what this is, because it's so unusual. You know, I am the leader, but I don't need to be in that position of the leader, which is the first thing, you know, that it takes a while before people understand that I don't need that. And then things shift. And a lot of people are people maybe like you who have followed integrity and then have paid the price for it, you know, and end up like, oh, what happened? Now I've been pushed out there and there because I have integrity. And so a lot of people end up in my course that have held on to their truth and integrity. And then this makes sense. The model makes sense of it all. Of course, there's the background of the satanic network, which is at the head of the toxic power structure. But there is the whole way in which, you know, we have maybe try to become aware of it. So this creates not only the community, but also practical ways of how to move forward. And I have done 3 online courses on a beginner level, and we're about to publish a kit that is basically the basic course. And starting in February, also a 2nd level course, mostly for providers, you know, to go deeper into this into the model. And then of course I've been so busy I haven't published the book of the unconditional model, but that is in the works. And as you can hear, that excites me. That I find that is what I love to do.
You're sparkling when you're talking about it. That's a really nice Ansicht, view. Anneke, the time is ticking. You said you have another meeting in a few minutes.
Yes, I should really go. Yeah.
Let me just try to. I hope you understand it in German, because I need to go deeper with this one. Ich möchte mich bei dir bedanken für deinen Mut und deine Stärke und die Arbeit, die du mit dir selbst bis jetzt gemacht hast. Andere nennen es Schattenarbeit oder wie auch immer. Jeder hat seine Wörter dafür, weil ich denke, dass das, was du hier getan hast und für dich getan hast, ein großer Ripple-Effekt nicht nur für dein Leben und die in deinem Umfeld, sondern glaube ich auch, dass das Schwingen sein könnten, die die ganze Welt und viele Menschen unterstützen, zur Rechenschaft gezogen werden. Und ich glaube, dass es wichtig ist, dass wir uns zusammenschließen und halt gemeinsam unsere Wahrheit aussprechen und dazu stehen, uns nicht judgen gegenseitig oder bewerten, oder dass wir aufhören zu kämpfen und versuchen einfach in Liebe diese Dinge zu transformieren zusammen, weil es geht nur zusammen. Sowohl die Täter als auch die Opfer, ich will da keinen ausschließen. Und ich danke dir nochmal, dass du dir die Zeit genommen hast dafür. Ich hoffe, weil ich habe so viele Fragen aufgeschrieben, aber sie sind in Wahrheit nicht wichtig. Ja? Wichtig ist, was hier zustande gekommen ist. Und vielleicht schaffen wir es in Zukunft nochmal. Es würde mich freuen, wenn der Connect hier bleibt. Speziell, wenn du irgendwann einmal, egal was du benötigst, wenn Menschen etwas von dir benötigen, sollen sie auf deine Homepage gehen oder mir eine E-Mail schreiben an help@whoknows.me. Wenn es in Österreich Menschen gibt, die Unterstützung brauchen oder whatsoever, es findet alles seinen Weg, sofern die Intention die richtige ist und man in dieses Tun kommt und dieses Gottvertrauen, diesen Spirit Connect wieder hat. Ich hoffe, du hast das alles verstanden. Vielen, vielen lieben Dank. Und vielleicht würdest du mir noch den Gefallen tun, meine Outros, wenn ich mit Menschen spreche, ist immer, stell dir vor, du schaust jetzt in diese Kamera und das, was du jetzt sagen wirst, hört morgen die ganze Welt in jeglicher Sprache. Was würdest du ihnen sagen? Vielleicht kannst du es versuchen auf Deutsch und ich werde es dann Englisch untertiteln, oder du sagst es in beiden. Was wäre deine Botschaft?
Meine Botschaft ist ganz nicht neu, aber die ist was ich bereicht habe, ist, dass die Liebe ist Wahrheit und die Liebe ist alles, was wir brauchen. Das ist alles, was mir geheilt hat, ist Liebe. Das ist we are leaving a time where exploitation and manipulation and lies. And love is the antidote, where it is connecting to truth, it is connecting to our true selves, and it is the only thing that makes a difference in anything. And you see it working in your own life when you choose it. You see the results in your own life, in the small ways, in the big ways. And it is the attractive force in the universe. So we have a duty to align ourselves with love and what it means, and what love on the highest level, of course. The Satanists would like you to believe that romantic love is the highest love. That is complete brainwashing. The spiritual, divine, unconditional love, that is what we all need to connect with. And that is the only thing that heals. And there is plenty of it. And it's often a matter of allowing it in, just opening your heart to allow the love in, because you will feel it when you open your heart, you let the love in, you will immediately also feel the pain.
Thank you.
And that is what is needed now. That's where we have to go.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, all the best from Vienna, and thank you very much. And thanks to the listeners and everybody who is seeing this. Thanks for your support. Thanks for your prayers. And I'm not sure if you, the listeners, know, but all your thoughts and all your emotions which you are projecting there have an effect. So keep everybody in your heart and send a positive energy across the globe. And if you want to hear more about different topics, like and subscribe this channel, and I hope to connect with you in the near future. Anneke, all the best from Vienna, and thank you very much. Sehr gerne, ich danke dir.
Vielen Dank für deine Zeit. Wenn du mehr von solchen Videos sehen willst, wie zum Beispiel diese da, vergiss nicht, den Kanal zu abonnieren und die Glocke. Wenn du uns unterstützen möchtest und zusätzlich exklusiven und Vorabzugriff auf unseren Content und diverse Livestreams haben möchtest, dann werd doch einfach Community-Mitglied. Ich würde mich freuen und ihr unterstützt uns dabei. In dem Sinne, alles Liebe und bis bald.
Who knows?